Hi, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, I'm Olivia. I talk about weird, creepy, interesting stories, so if you're into that type of stuff, feel free to subscribe. Now, let's talk about Joanna Dennehy, who's been described as Britain's most dangerous woman, who ended the lives of 3 men in a bloody 10-day rampage that became known as the Peterborough Ditch Murders. Joanna Christine Dennehy was born in 1982 in St. Albans, Hertfordshire, England, and grew up in Harpenden, 70 miles from where she would eventually commit her crime spree. She lived with her father Kevin, who worked as a security guard, her mother Kathleen, who was a shop manager, and her younger sister Maria. Her upbringing, by all accounts, was a stable and loving one, though later Joanna would claim she was abused as a child. There's no evidence for this, her family disputes it, and it's important to note that Joanna is a well-known liar, but it's something to consider. What isn't disputed is the deterioration of her behavior as she entered her teenage years. Up to that point, she had done well in school, but as she began to experiment with alcohol and drugs, her grades declined, and she even showed up to school drunk on at least one occasion. She also spent more and more time with kids of bad influence and began to self-harm. At age 15, she left home and entered a relationship with 20-year-old John Trainer, who she would subsequently have 2 children with. After giving birth to her first child at 17 years old, she became permanently estranged from her parents after she told them that they would have to pay to see their grandchild. As time went on, Trainer and others around the family noticed Joanna's increasing narcissism. She would put her own wants and desires above those of anyone else, including her own children. She even remarked to her friends that she had never wanted children. Her use of alcohol increased, as did her tendency to become violent. She would show no remorse for her actions or empathy for others. Joanna also had a tendency to manipulate and dominate men that would characterize most of the relationships in her life. That was especially true of her relationship with Trainer. She cheated on him with men and women. She was also physically abusive, lashing out at him when she got drunk. She would leave home for days or weeks on end, only to return asking for forgiveness. The turning point came when she threw a knife into the floor of their flat and coldly told Trainer she could kill someone. He was so scared that in 2009 he took the children and relocated, leaving Joanna alone and homeless. This only caused her behavior to decline further. She began stealing and sometimes turned to sex work to fund her drug and alcohol habit. In 2012, she served several short prison sentences where she underwent psychological evaluation and was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Underlying psychopathic traits were noted, including impulsivity, violence, and anger. She was subsequently prescribed medication to regulate her moods. Upon her release in 2013, Joanna became a tenant of 48-year-old Kevin Lee, a landlord in Peterborough. Lee rented out cheap rooms to people who were vulnerable. Lee began paying rent for Joanna, and the pair entered into a sexual relationship. Joanna had particular sexual tastes. She was a consumer of violent pornography and a habitual self-harmer. She would cut her body, sometimes even during intercourse. Her increasingly violent behavior allowed her to perform the role of enforcer for Lee. She would intimidate and threaten people into paying their outstanding rent and other debts. With her rent paid and a paying job, Joanna felt like her life was more stable than it had been in a long time. Convinced that she was in control, she stopped taking her medication altogether. Everything culminated on March 19, 2013, when she lured Lucas Slaboszewski, a 31-year-old Polish national who had met Joanna through a shared interest in alcohol and drugs, to a property in Peterborough with suggestive texts. Slaboszewski had always desired something more of their relationship, but Joanna had other plans. She stabbed him to death and then put his body in a trash can where she left it for several days. She enlisted the help of Gary Stretch, who had a criminal history and was 7 feet tall. You would think he would be the domineering figure in their relationship, but Joanna was in control. Stretch helped her cover up the murder of Slaboszewski and moved his body. But this wouldn't be the last time Stretch helped her, since now Joanna had developed a taste for killing. This was very unfortunate for 56-year-old John Chapman, a resident of one of Lee's properties who had never gotten along with Joanna. On March 29th, she attacked Chapman with a pocket knife, stabbing him once in the neck, twice in the heart, and 3 times in the chest. That same day, she lured her landlord and lover, Kevin Lee, to one of his rental properties with the promise of sexual favors. Like the others, she stabbed him to death. His body was found the next day in a ditch near Newborough. She had dressed his body in a black sequin dress as what was described as a final act of humiliation. Again, she called up Gary Stretch to help her dump the bodies. Both Chapman and Samozetsky's bodies were found on April 3rd in ditches near Peterborough. Then they skipped town, committing robberies as they moved across the country. Another man, Mark Lloyd, was with them, though Mark is not considered an accomplice. On April 2nd, Stretch drove Joanna around Hereford as she searched for more victims. She stabbed 2 men who were out walking their dogs, chosen separately and at random. She stabbed 63-year-old Robin Bereza multiple times before leaving him for dead. 10 minutes later, she attacked 56-year-old John Rogers, again stabbing him multiple times and leaving him for dead, but this time she also stole his dog. Luckily, both men survived her vicious attacks, though they were critically injured. The attacks drew a lot of attention, and soon police had surrounded the entire area. Though she seemed ready to be arrested, she didn't fight back when they took her into custody. She specifically targeted men during her killing spree. She even told Lloyd that she didn't want to kill a woman, especially not a woman with a child. She also told him that she wanted to kill 9 men in total, just like Bonnie and Clyde, an American criminal couple, though that's actually inaccurate since Bonnie and Clyde are believed to have killed 9 police officers and 4 civilians. Joanna's purpose for all this killing was entertainment. She had told her accomplice, Gary Stretch, as they prowled for her next victim, quote, "I want my fun. I need you to get my fun." She later told a psychiatrist that she found murder to be Moorish, and that after she killed for the first time, she got a taste for it. It became evident that she not only had a taste for killing, but a love for her own notoriety. She described herself as a monster while on the run. She also boasted that she had killed 8 men in all, including her father, 2 people in a house fire, and 2 in a hit and run. Though her father is very much alive, and there's no evidence to support her claim that she killed any more than the 3 men we know about, which in November of 2013, she pled guilty to the 3 murders and the 2 attempted murders. Her sister Maria was unsurprised by the guilty plea and said, quote, "I think she did that to control the situation. She likes people to know she's the boss." Joanna was held at the HM prison Bronzefield. Assessing psychiatrists would later diagnose her with psychopathic, antisocial, and borderline personality disorders. After her arrest, she was diagnosed with having paraphilia sadomasochism, which is when a person derives sexual pleasure from both giving and receiving pain and humiliation. While Joanna was on remand before the trial, prison staff found an escape plot in her diary. This involved killing or seriously injuring a prison guard, cutting off one of the guard's fingers, and using the amputated finger to fool the biometric system in the prison. Because of the plot, she was placed in solitary confinement from September 2013 until September 2015. Along with Gary Stretch, another man Joanna manipulated into helping her was 36-year-old Leslie Layton. Both men stood trial charged with a range of crimes assisting Joanna. Both decided not to give evidence or face cross-examination. Prosecutors argued that Joanna had cast a spell over her accomplices. Layton was found guilty for perverting the course of justice and sentenced to 14 years. Stretch was sentenced to life with a minimum sentence of 19 years for his role in the 2 attempted murders, as well as helping Joanna dump the 3 bodies. On February 28, 2014, Joanna was sentenced to life imprisonment. The trial judge, Justice Spencer, recommended that she should never be released, due to the premeditation of each murder. Spencer said further that Joanna was a sadomasochist and lacked the normal range of human emotions. She is just one of 3 women to ever be given a life sentence in the UK. The other 2 are Britain's most infamous female killers, Myra Hindley, now deceased, who carried out the Moors murders with Ian Brady, and Rosemary West, who tortured and murdered young women and children along with her husband, Fred West. What's interesting is that, strictly speaking, Joanna is not a serial killer. That would require a cooling off period between the murders. Instead, she's classified as a multiple murderer or a spree killer. David Wilson, a professor of criminology at Birmingham City University, remarked, quote, "This case is unique and unprecedented. Serial killers disengage from the process of killing and revert to their normal life. There was never any sense of her disengaging. She seemed to have constantly been in the moment of killing." In 2018, she launched a bid to marry her cellmate Haley Palmer, and they tried to kill themselves together in a suicide pact. When that failed, Joanna tried to kill herself again, which was also unsuccessful. In 2019, she was moved to Low Newton Prison, and upon her arrival, she threatened to kill Rosemary West, who had to be moved to another prison for her own safety. She seems to revel in her notoriety, even inside prison, so this is probably far from the last time she will cause trouble. But for now, that is the wild story of Joanna Dennehy.